Welcome to the You Go and Get It Girl podcast, a platform engineered to inspire girls and women of all ages to follow in the footsteps of high-achieving women in business, entertainment, and sports. A living reminder that you can't stop a go-getter. Go-getter, noun, defined as an aggressively enterprising person. A go-getter knows they can have any life you want. You can too, but you have to take it. You have to go and get it. We hope to help you do just that. Here is your host, Kurt Richardson.
Right, thanks for joining us, the You Go and Get It Girl podcast. I've got the CEO of the Richardson household, Angela Richardson, with us, business extraordinaire as well, and Spartan gymnast. And she doesn't know I'm going to say this. She was the first female Spartan to win the Wayne Duke Award from the Big Ten. So we're going to LFG that and give her a little loving on that. Leah Mitchell is joining us. And best of all, we have a super special guest. I don't even know how I'm going to do the intro on this one because there's so many things. So this is like 10% of our guest here today, which is I'm going twin mom first. Yeah. As someone married to a twin mom, I can't leave that off of the resume. Former executive vice president of Rock Nation, former president of Superfly, podcaster, taking care of Lady Business podcast host on In Style Magazine's 50 Most Badass Women, which we're going to talk about here in a second. The idea of just being a badass and advocating for being a badass. And then, by the way, she of course works with some artists you may have heard of like Outkast, Beyoncé, and the kid from Marcy Projects who did All Right, Jay-Z. And then on top of all that, and this is what we'll spend our time talking about, she said, you know what I want to do? I want to leave all that behind and I want to go fight the patriarchy, build the matriarchy, and do something, be advocates for, she's a mother of twins, she can get into that if she wants to talk about her kids at all, but she leaves all that behind to go fight for women all over, which is how we connected, is that I've been working with student female athletes for so long, and one of them one day said, they asked me a question, and I said, I can't answer that because I've never walked into the room being a female. And she recommended me to Jennifer, and one of the first things I heard Jennifer say is, you've never been an other, talking to the general male public. So thank you for joining us, Jennifer Justice, who we affectionately call JJ from Fire Island, New York.
Temporarily from Fire Island, New York.
I love it
so much.
By the way, I do think of you as quintessentially New York. Yeah, we'll talk about your background in a second, but Angela and I go to New York often. I work with the Jets and Giants, so we're there a lot. Well, we're in New Jersey a lot, but every now and then we try to sneak into the city. But I've been watching a lot of your stuff, and I'm just like, oh, she is just like the textbook quintessential New York badass. Yeah. I want to start though, before you were a New Yorker, and I think this is always great for girls and women to know, because so often we look at somebody, we look at the end result of your life, like, oh, she was the president of a major life, she was an executive vice president, but you don't come from pedigree, I think I could safely say. So would you mind talking a little bit about just your background? And then I think that's something that I always want to drill home with people is there's people winning all across the world that had a regular start or even a less than ideal start. And I think you fall into that, learning what I've known about you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think there's plenty of us who, there are people who are born on third base, to use reference, and there's some who, weren't even in the parking lot when the game started. So, and I'm falling that latter category. My mom didn't graduate from high school. Everybody from my family's very humble beginnings, loggers, stay-at-home housewives who literally were like full-time job housewives with no help and doing everything. And it wasn't expected for any of us to be going to college, but I did really well in school. And I was like, I looked around, I was like, this is not the life I want. Like, I want my own choices, and I don't want to just be told that this is the lot in life that I was given. So there's something to be said for nature versus nurture, because it wasn't really supported, it was like not out of like vengeance, out of fear. It was like, oh, we don't do that. Like, what's going to happen if you try? And I just did really well in school, and I used that to propel me to the next level, and got me to University of Washington with, a big scholarship because I didn't have any money and work study and all of that. And then, grants mostly. And then to Cornell Law School, which, I got a scholarship there too. But then it was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? Because being in a big Wall Street firm and, not coming from pedigree, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to get the same kind of clients as they did because their dads and moms were general counsels at XYZ. I was like, that's the only way and I was really ambitious. So I was like, music, I know that I can relate. I know that I come from the same background as most of these people, and I could be an advocate where I can't sing. Those who don't sing become the lawyer for. And so that's what I decided to do, and and it worked. And so I kind of like took my passions and my strengths and melded them from the beginning in something that I knew that I could succeed. And that's how I got my start and how I built on it.
I love it. One thing that I heard you say, and correct me if I heard this wrong, but it sounded like, and the reason I ask is I wonder if there was resistance to this idea. I thought I heard you say in one of your interviews that school was easy for you. And sometimes when that's the case for girls, it's not welcomed all the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that like, yes, it was easy for me. And yes, I got, but it wasn't like it was, known. Like, it wasn't like I was raising my hand all the time and everybody's like, oh, there's the know-it-all, or she knows everything. I just quietly got good grades, without people knowing, and did really well in school. So, and just kept like moving it forward. So it wasn't like nobody expected me to have good grades, but I just did, and I used it to my advantage. I just never would talk about it.
Was it ever celebrated?
Oh, not really. It was like when everything I did, I was usually taken by my friends, parents, and if I did really well in school, my mom was like, great. She never was like, what's going on? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it was a very hands-off approach, which worked for me. I don't know if it worked now or for my kids or for everyone, but it worked for me, and it was just never an issue. Because my sister did really well too, but she didn't have my personality. And so she just kind of did, followed in my mom's footsteps.
That same life. And that's what I hope everybody, there's going to be a lot of people watching this who are college athletes and feel like their sport saved them, but because of how they grew up. And I just want people to know, I look at Jennifer as like an icon and a titan in business. Even if you haven't felt supported, there is this end process. And too often we don't see I guess it is becoming cooler now to start from the bottom, but it wasn't always like that. Almost usually people would get successful and then get away from their roots. So yeah, I appreciate you.
No, I hear that there's a big trend too, even in some of the Ivy League schools. It's like the people who are born on third base, it's like you need some kind of variety in there to get other viewpoints, you know what I mean? And so instead of thinking about, oh, I feel left out, think about the strengths and things that you can bring in perspective, because your consumer base, no matter what you do, whether you're an athlete or you're, an executive, you come from a perspective most of the time from the buyer, the person who's going to, follow you or celebrate you or, become your fan or buy your merchandise or buy your product, whatever it is, the consumer. I mean, women control 80% of the purchasing power alone, but when it comes to just everything in general, it's called a 1% for a reason. There's another 99.
Jennifer, you mentioned that people didn't know that you were getting great grades, and then also being a girl in the class getting great grades. Was there a moment that you look back on that you knew that you were going to have to fight harder than the boys in your class?
It wasn't until I actually started working and as a music attorney that I realized that there was such a vast disparity and a glass ceiling. So it was much later, and that's where it started my journey toward gender equality, because I was doing deals for women and men executives in the music industry. And I did a deal for a guy, entry level at Universal Music Publishing, and he was immediately offered as a director level, offered a low six figure salary, and hadn't even really accomplished that much, but his potential was so great. They were going to give him this big thing. Then I did a deal for, she was more seasoned, a senior director, effectively in the same group, A&R, which is the revenue generating group. And she was offered a high 5-figure, and she had already and I was like, wait, what? Why is this okay? I needed my then boss, because I wasn't a partner at the firm yet. I was like, what? Everybody else is fine with it. I was like, well, why are we fine with it? We have this knowledge. This is not okay, And I think, and that's when I was like, oh, this is crazy. So I said, fine, you go fight for it. I did. I only got her $10,000 more. She actually talks about it quite a bit too. And you know, because I remind her of it, she was like, "Oh my God, right, that was so screwed up." But it's our lack of like understanding and knowing that we can fight for it and knowing like to expose it. And regardless of you're the person, because it's daunting to do it yourself, if somebody else is going, "Wait a minute, this is not okay." You know, that's most of my clients. It's like they're C-level, C-suite, and I'm like, "It's not okay." And they're like, "Really? Okay. Like we can fight for it." Yeah. And it's easier if they have somebody else doing it for them. But that's when I really noticed it. And that's when I was like, okay, this is not all right. And any place that it happens to me, I'm leaving.
Hmm.
And like, that's it.
And that's
And
what makes your
anytime-
story so cool, because I think you were in a weird spot, because I can tell you're an advocate and I know that this is deep rooted in you, but also you're a mom and you've got people that are like counting. You've mentioned before that you represent your kids, but I love the idea of agency as a parent. And I think that's very bold. So that meeting happens and it's a year later, or is it a long time? Is that just like the first domino that falls where you're like, whoa, this
that
is
was the
different?
first domino. That was like
Okay.
20 years ago, you know,
Okay.
it was way before Me Too, way before it was like cool to, you know, it's like when I was like, "We need to fight," and women were like, "Shh, don't. I want to be the only woman in the room. Just give me the most I can. But like, I don't want to like, you know, burn bridges. I don't want to get fired." And I understand that because it was like that. It was like, you're lucky, you know, we were treated like you're lucky to be here. We don't need you, you know? And then once it was like Me Too came out and everybody was like, "Wait, that happened to me. That happened to me. That happened to me too." And literally, which is why Me Too, it's like
Yeah.
it all happened. And we're like, en masse went, "Wait, this is so screwed up. Like, we need to do something about it."
Collective
The problem
shift.
is it's continuing to happen all day long in places where they are confident that the women will band together. You know, the music industry, definitely. It's probably 15 years behind the rest of the world, even finance and tech, because it's so many publicly traded companies have had to like, you know, do something and say something about it. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing that really takes en masse women coming together and advocates, you know, male advocates like you, Kurt, you know, to really be on our side.
There's so many companies are private and they don't care if Jennifer leaves or Kurt leaves or Kurt speaks up, or for Angela or Leah leaves. They don't,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
there's someone else that will do it. That's interesting.
Yes. And won't make waves. Yeah.
That's what happens in sports too. And I know that a lot of the women that I've been interacting with lately are like, "Kurt, help me get into sports." And I'm trying to use this as a vehicle to maybe make connections, but not this interview, obviously, but other interviews are specifically designed like, "Hey, watch what this woman did and duplicate this." But that world requires you to give up a lot of yourself because they know somebody else will do it. And I'd love your take on, and Leah knows that, like, as she's trying to break in. What do you think I know at some point you've got to pay the bills, and at some point, if you do well, you can advocate better than on the front end. Do you have like kind of a general philosophy of like, hey, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get in the door? Or are you wishing you had never played ball at all and just really focused on what you're doing now and advocating for women well?
I wouldn't have had a voice but for what I've done. So what I say is, look, there's a lot of times in the very beginning of your career in particular, and I mean, even as you go on, because I'll tell the story after when I say here, and I would just say maximize what you can get at that job if you have to take it, with your knowing that that's all it is. It's a job. Okay. This is not something like, you know, I have so many women, it's like, "But they really needed me and they said they didn't have enough money." And it's like, screw that. It is a job. It is business. Go in and take it, play the game, knowing that you have one foot out the door and find that next move. Get the most amount of money, maximize the amount of contacts you can make, maximize the amount of information you can learn, knowing that you're not going to be there in a year or 2 years. Right. And you got to like take the hit for a while to do it. Because there was a woman that I was moving from, a client of mine. She was making, you know, a large sum of money, but I knew that she could be making like 4 times as much and run an entire division. So I took her from one entertainment company, and I was first had to try to convince her to do it. And then when I finally did, then it's like she, you know, then we are getting the deal done. It was literally 4 times as much money. She was already making a high 6-figure. Okay. Like, so that's how much money she'd been leaving on the table over the years. And she was like, "Well, this is like, it's just going to suck." And I was like, "Of course it is going to suck, but it's going to suck with a lot more money. So live the same standard of living you were before, put that all away. So you have that serious FU money for when you were leaving, and you're set up, and now you have college funds for your kids. And now you have this. So like, and do that on every level. And we laughed. I saw her like last week and we laughed about it. Remember when you were like, oh, it's going to suck. And instead of me going, no, it's going to, no. I was like, yes, it will. But it's going to be suck with money, which does not buy you happiness, but it buys you convenience of the ability to make choices, real choices in your life for you and your family. She's the breadwinner. So just have to put that in your mind.
It's funny that you mentioned on the Angela's heard me tell this story a ton. I keynote speak all over. And the first one, I knew that when Angela and I were dating, I wanted to take her to New York City for a date, like fly out, like literally go there for like 6 hours and come back. And so, I do well in my real job, but this person, that it just so happened that a big finance firm in downtown Detroit, that's where we lived, called and was like, hey, we heard you do these things for the kids. One of them is now like an intern here, and he recommended you do a keynote. How much do you want to charge for that? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I thought about it, and I was like, $3,000. And I thought that was ridiculous. And they said yes in 1 second. And I was like, oh no. And so I love that you speak to women about the point of 4 times is blowing my mind, of course. But I know it's not marginal. These companies are doing well, especially right now, and whether you believe there's a recession or not, everyone's doing well in business. People are having record profits. If you just line up the companies having record profits, I love your advocacy for not only asking for wealth and getting people comfortable. Like they're not going to give it to you. You're not going to earn your way to it, buddy your way to it, friend your way to it, or even perform your way to it. You've got to ask.
Yeah, you have to ask. You got to take it.
Well, yeah, I think there was a question about getting in. I can't remember. I remember seeing one of them said something about cringe. Like,
So one of the questions were, what is the cringe thing you hate to see young women do to try to get their foot in the door in the entertainment industry? And what should they avoid doing to get the attention of the Jennifers of the entertainment world?
I mean, there's so many like cliche ones that are obvious, right? But it's like, honestly, if you feel comfortable doing it and getting your foot in the door, however, like, first of all, it's like network, etc. Just do it. Just that, like, but taking in context what I said before, it's like it's like you can get in there. Just know that it might not be what you want. Like when I was first interviewing to be a music attorney, I wanted to go. I thought Grubman and Dursky. It was called Schindler. Then I don't know. It's called Grubman and Dursky. Something was the place, and it's still like one of the top law firms. But I walked in, and it was like all white Jewish men, and I was like, nothing about that was they were going to. And I finally, at the end of the interview, knowing that this is a place I thought I needed to work, I asked them. I said, "Where are the women?" And they were like, "Out there." And I was like, "Oh, you mean the assistants?" I mean, I knew I wasn't going to get that job, but like 6 months later, one of the attorneys from there started his own firm, and I met with him, and I had never met with him when I went for the first interview, and he went out with some of the guys I did interview with, and he asked them, and he was telling them, "Oh, we met this woman, her name's Jennifer Justice, we're going to hire her." And they were like, "Oh yeah, we met with her." And they're like, "Why didn't we hire her?" And he goes, "She was too ambitious." And I was like, I love telling the story because they still have no women at that firm. Like if they have one. And no people of color, like, and when I say no, it's probably like one, and there's like 40 attorneys, you know what I mean? And so, look, there's a lot of things that are going to be cringeworthy to you when you look back, but you're just trying to get in, you're trying to do it. And just know that, like, if you have to do that to get in, what you're going to have to do to like stay there. And again, like, if you have to do it, but like, know that your foot is out the door and maximize your potential there, and maximize everything you can do and use it as like a learning experience. So, I think a cringeworthy thing is always pretending to be somebody you're not, because when you walk in the door, because you're never going to be able to be yourself. Not like you have to bring your true self to a job, like a career early on. But, I think that's one of the things. Hopefully that answered the question.
No, definitely.
Go ahead if you have a follow.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, so this kind of leads into another question that was on there, but just wondering, to get into these big companies, do you have to know someone, or can you get a chance without having a connection?
No, I mean, it does help to have a connection, but I find that now you have so many ways to reach out to people. If we're LinkedIn or going to events and doing your research, finding out who people are, flattery goes a long way in this business. People are extremely egotistical in entertainment, and when people know who they are, they'd love to hear the flattery and, oh, what, when you did this and when you did that, you know what I mean? And just doing the research, there's so many ways to find out who people are. So find out, what I would say is find the people that like you want to emulate in the business or surrounding those people and reach out to them, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that is going to events and finding them, know what they look like, introducing yourself. Like, you know, when you find that there's people that you know are mutual have in common, ask that mutual person to introduce you. You know, you want to be seen as ambitious. Because people like that, you know, it's like you can bring in a protege and like, you know, you're appealing to their egotistical side of things and it works.
What's interesting about you bringing up the ambition thing, one of the goals for this is like to demystify the ambition thing, because I'll tell you, for me, what was hard is because I come from the projects, hard life, I felt like I always had house money, and that allowed me to operate in ways that you think you've kind of described here. Like, you know, people ask me sometimes to do a diversity thing. I go right to their thing. If they have no Black people, for me, right, that's one of my biggest advocacies. I don't do it. I tell them, no, that's performance. I'm not doing it. If they have no women, I'm a girl dad. I have twin daughters. I have a 26-year-old daughter. I have a granddaughter. If you got all dudes in a room, I'm all set. I'm not doing it. But it can only happen if you can pay your bills. You know, it's like hard to turn down, especially in the keynote world, $5,000-$10,000. Because you don't agree with their, I don't know if it's called politics or their policy or whatever it is, like, but I won't do it. And I want women to be bold that way. I love that especially if you're not going to get the job anyways, it's house money. Plant that seed. Like, no, man, like, where are the ladies at?
I talk about it all the time because it's like, you still have some of the biggest female artists from J-Lo to Lady Gaga to Madonna who are at that firm. I'm like, why? So many choices out there other than literally lining the pockets of old white men. Yeah. That's what they continue to do. It's like, don't tell me that you care about this stuff and line the pockets of old white men.
I think right now is a unique time. At least there's a collective shift. And that's the Me Too to me as well. Like pretty much everyone's knocking on the door like, hey, we're not going to spend the next 100 years doing it this way.
Well, my whole point is that we can do it as well. Yeah. And so, you know, and I learned a lot from working with men. I'm trying to level women up, not push men down. That is not my point. But if you're going to be performative, or if you're not going to get in this, like basically 2022, I'm going to call it out because it's just, you know, I'm not going to not say anything about it. And after a while, it's like, yes, it's like if you're well in your 70s, have a ton of money, why are you still taking business away from the other people who, if you really think it, like could stand to gain? Because it's not like none of us are curing cancer here. We're not solving world peace or climate change. Like none of us. Like we're in entertainment, okay? Like the world will exist without any of us, including any of the artists. There's always somebody else. So like step aside, retire. Use your money, like, you know, invest in like finding the pipeline that you think doesn't exist, although it does. Do something else, like, because look at the damage that you caused to your life and then try to write it. Because I know I've cleared many songs that were talking about bitches and hoes. And like, you know what? This is my retribution too. Because everyone has done something, you know?
I love that. One of the things that my wife and I talked about is, so I wasn't going to share this with you, but I think I am. So I think I'm so grateful for everyone that's been involved with this. There's some women that are doing this, and I want my daughters, my babies, and I include the Leahs of the world. People, I walk into a room and there's 25 female student athletes. I know they have something unique, that competitive. I know they're special, and maybe the world didn't tell them that, or they didn't have representation the way that I saw men being a superhero. I've been conscious of that for a while, and now it's like time to just clear the way on that and talk about the advantages of being female. I look at you as someone like I would hope these girls be like, right? Not just learn from and be like. And I know you had to go a long way down the path to be bold. But sometimes people all tell me like, oh, I wish I could say what you could say. And I'm like, you can, but I understand there's economics behind it and there's opportunity behind it and there's all these other things. But it just starts with like finding stuff that you're willing to take a stand on. And one of the things that I think is kind of, my wife just explained it to me, is you talk a lot about intuition, and that's got us talking about it in our house. I think that's a superpower. When I started in finance, the number one person at our company was a female. She sat next to me. She made millions of dollars for herself, tens of millions of dollars for the company. People always came to sit with her and they hated it because they would say, why'd you do that? She's like, well, I felt this, or he said that, and it makes me think this. And I would just laugh because people would like book an appointment with her like 4 months out to shadow her, and they would be so let down. She was operating almost mostly off it. She's skilled, of course, but we all in that level of finance, everyone knows the numbers and the math, but she was really in tune. And I just grew up. I met her at 22, and we worked together for 11 years. I watched her whoop everyone's ass for a decade, and they didn't like that intuition was a part of it. So I wonder, I've heard you talk about it with your guests, but I'd love the JJ take on it. Like, do you look at it as a superpower? Like, is it something that you've got to build? Is it like process oriented? Like you take a couple leaps of faith and then it made you feel stronger about speaking up or taking a path or leaving freaking one of the biggest agencies in the world to go, start the Justice Department, like on behalf of other people? Like, that's very giving. Like, that takes a huge amount of courage.
Well, I mean, it is. It's definitely, intuition is a hard thing to explain. And it's like, did I have the same intuitions? Like if I look back when I was in my 20s and 30s, probably. Did I feel like I could or had the confidence to follow them? Probably not.
Okay.
So I made a lot of bad choices. I just had to follow the signs, and I'm not a religious person or necessarily even a spiritual person. I mean, I'm probably more spiritual, but it was like, there's something that I knew if I was being true to myself and in my most confident self, without the noise and stuff like that. And now there's so much more because of social media, the noise. It's like, I'm doing something right. And every time I follow this, better things happen for me. It doesn't mean it's easier, but better things than if I do something where it's like in my gut, I'm like, oh, it just doesn't feel right. And I find that women really have it. And I don't know if it's an instinct because of motherhood, but it's something, you don't even have to be a mother, but because we can, it's like, our bodies react and our brains and we react differently to chemicals like male and female. I don't know a ton about the science, but I know enough to know that, like, for instance, we react to risk much differently. Men have knee-jerk reactions to it, where women, and just like yes or no, or women like have to pause and you have to think about it. We give birth, like, and we don't know when the baby's coming, right? So our body and our brain has to be like, okay, now that's the time to react. If we acted like men, no babies would be born. They'd all be dead. Like, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think about it, like, you know what I mean? And so we react to risk and stress much differently. And I think that has something to do with it. This is all conjecture. I have no science.
I'm with it. I just want to have the conversation. I've had 3 of the most badass women in my life, like unbelievably, that's not only successful, but just like, I want my babies to be like that. Like, and all of them are like, I would say 80%, like they have trouble duplicating what they do because they've honed a skill that is like, it's not 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
So I don't have a ton of knowledge on this because it was a quick read, but the reason estrogen plays a huge part in a woman's intuition, it's the warm, fuzzy, I have a feeling, quote unquote, that men say, like, it's their emotions, but men have the testosterone, and it leads to analytical thinking. So that's the difference between how a man uses his quote unquote gut, it's an analytical thought, and a woman uses her intuition or feelings.
Right.
How that leads to my question, how, like, you mentioned that your intuition when you were in your 20s and 30s was probably similar to what it is now. But how do we teach girls, or even, young women to trust that instinct? Because it's there, right? All of us experience it, but how do we teach them to listen to it?
It's a hard one because there's so many factors outside, right? You know what I mean? And so you could take an extreme case, like all these horrible cases coming out about like gymnasts and Larry Nassar, you know what I mean? It's like they all have the intuition that this was not right, but they knew it. But at the same time, it's like, how do you come forward, right? You need that kind of like support system too. And I think that one of the biggest things that women can do, because we are built around community, is have that support system. That's not necessarily your family or your friends. It's people who are like-minded and doing the things and have the same kind of ambitions and goals as you, and not even necessarily in the same industry, because we can still get competitive in same industries because of the fact that we're still only allowed one spots, one office, whatever. And that's going to change if we can build these support systems in different kind of areas, you know what I mean? And instead of just being in one, like all lawyers being together, it's like, no, it's like the lawyer, the athlete, the banker, the doctor, that are all kind of together telling each other stories, because we have we have similar situations that happen to us, but that way you still feel the support and you don't feel a competition, right, in it. And so I think it's like just garnering that and like, you know, have your support systems in all different areas. You know, you still want your family and your friends, right, to go with, but people who might be guiding your career, you may never meet in person or have a drink with, you know what I mean? Or invite to your wedding or whatever that is, but they are still like a support system. And I think you need to do it, whether you're paying for it, you're part of a group that you pay for. You know, there's so many now women's networking organizations, and that it's like, I would take advantage of as many of them as you can and see which ones work for you.
Leah, at your age, are you feeling that as you're going out into the world, like, hey, this is what I think I want to do? Or when you're in situations like, you know, like, are you starting to feel like, all right, it makes sense to go back to Florida, and not saying that, like, or are you kind of still going with the wind?
Yeah.
Recent graduate, by the way, JJ. We're very proud of Leah Mitchell.
Thank you. I think definitely, I feel like right now, just the time in my life, I'm kind of wondering, just trying to figure out where. And I think intuition plays a big role in it, because sometimes you can have an interview with someone and you just feel like maybe this isn't the best fit for me. And if that plays a role. And then speaking on the fact about how men are analytical, I actually saw a TikTok, I'm not even kidding, like yesterday or the day before, talking about how women are emotional thinkers and men are logical thinkers. I don't know if that has to relate to what you guys are talking about, but it just reminded me of that TikTok. But yeah, as I'm like approaching the job world, I definitely feel like intuition plays a big role. And I'm also big in my faith, so pretty spiritual. So I really try to like let God navigate where I should end up. So that way, I don't know, I just want to end up somewhere where I don't compromise my morals and values for anyone.
Yeah.
It's funny, you mentioned scarcity, JJ. Coming from the neighborhood, it's very hard for people, especially where I live. Angela and I live on a golf course. Our kids are going to grow up, she grew up in a mobile home. I grew up in the public housing. Our kids are going to grow up way different than us. When people talk to me, especially how I talk in the rooms I'm in, they talk to me like I'm not a kid from the streets. And I completely understand all the context behind that. But people are like, how could someone kill somebody over $7? And they just can't understand scarcity in the way that I can. And you just touched on something that's less tragic, but more impactful. When I watch, I think the idea of women being catty, even if it's real, and I don't know how much it is, I think sometimes things get blown out of proportion. It's like human nature, like not everyone gets along, but women are expected to be so communal, like that guys can have a riff and it's not anything, and women do it and it's catty. But when it is catty, I think you just hit on it, and you've probably seen this, there's only one job. People got to do, it's the scarcity is what creates the conflict, I feel like. Have you noticed that in your world?
So I notice people talking about it a lot, right? But I don't notice it actually happening as much, because ultimately it's like, just because we're the same gender doesn't mean we all get along. You know what I mean? And just like, you know, guys, so it's like, yeah, we might hold grudges a little more, but when it comes to like supporting each other, like in business, it's happening more and more and more. And yes, it is like the abundance mind frame versus scarcity, and you just got to put yourself in there, because there is enough space for us in building a matriarch system, right? We can build our own. You know, if you hire, you know, women who own their own companies instead of things that ladder up to men for services, for their products, for their goods, supporting them, whether it be in their, you know, sporting stuff. Even if you don't want to go, you could still buy a ticket, you know what I mean? Or in films, we've done that all the time. Like, there's a bunch of groups, it's like, everyone buy a ticket to this. Like, it might be taking place in Minnesota, you know what I mean? And we buy a ticket, because it's like supporting and lining the pockets of women, and women control 80% of the purchasing power in their families. I control 100%. I'm a single mom. So, you know, I can put my money where my mouth is and walk the talk, you know?
I love the idea of supporting women with your dollar. If you can't, you got to do what you got to do. Hit like on the post, share the page or whatever. But if you can buy a movie ticket, or if you can buy a product, an earring, a leggings, or whatever the thing is, you got to support women with their dollar, or none of that. I mean, and you know this better than anyone. I can hear you talking about the matriarchy doesn't work as a non-economic result.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. We live in
it's
a
not going to be a
capitalist
feel-good thing.
we live in a capitalist society.
Yeah.
That's not changing.
Yeah.
Like, because you know what? If it did, like, none of us would be here today talking about it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you know what I mean? We would be, you know, in any other kind of economic, you know, system, we would not be here.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't have the advantages. And, you know, it's very mass generalization. We've never had a capitalist system that has the others equal to white men, and we outnumber them by, you know, a lot.
Sure.
So, you know, what would it look like then? Would we need as many philanthropical organizations? You know, they're started to become redundant. Would we need all of those? If we had a system that had more social impact along with the capitalism, instead of, you know, just giving money to get rid of the problem, it's actually solving the problem. You know,
like I always have sat by assistants. Shout out to CubeMate Forever, who I know is going to watch this. I always understood the centralized power assistants had, but to your point, I'm with you 100%. You walk in a room, there's 40 women there. How many of them have power? Is what we're talking about, and I feel like, and I'd love your take on this. I feel like you walked away from power to go build power, or at least you had influence. And you said something I'd love your take on, of how long it took to get over this, because people don't think high achievers have doubt. And you said, without Jay-Z, are people going to take me serious?
Yeah.
And I wonder how long you wrestled with that thought. And then also like, what did you wrestle with the idea of leaving the influence? Like, maybe I have to stay here to do it, to have, you know, to build the power base.
Well, I mean, I did take advantage for a long time of, you know, using that network. And then when I left, I quickly, you know, it was just something that was like, it was just this voice inside of me that I was like, I could not silence it anymore. It's like, you have to go do something else. You have to, like, and, you know, I just wasn't happy. So I just took that chance, but it was very quickly did it prove itself right that I still had the power no matter what. That was in me personally. It was not because of, right?
Or deputized.
You know what I mean? And now I have a very powerful mission and purpose that if anybody, you know, almost out of fear, they don't want to go against me because they could be outed for it. Because they're like, this is a great purpose. What, do you not have a wife? Do you not have a daughter? You know what I mean? Are you not a woman? Like, what am I doing that's so wrong here? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I mean, I think it you know, look at the years of experience, and my legacy was set. So I was with Jay-Z for 17 years. So it made it much easier, you know, so I'm not going to say it's like some flip thing, you know, but having doubts. Yes. If you don't have doubts and you're not like challenged, then why are you doing it? You know what I mean? It's like, that's the other thing. It's like, wanted to propel myself. It was getting like, Jay-Z was the most powerful he'd ever been. Like, we could get anything done. That's not like a challenge. That's just like, you know, going no or yes, or we're going to do this. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Not to say it wasn't hard, or things weren't hard or challenging for them or him now, but it's, you know, it was kind of doing the same thing over and over.
Not the same as hiring people to build out the Justice Department and like starting from scratch. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, here's another stat, right? It's like everyone talks about the gender pay gap, right? And then that women only make 80% of what men do. That is white women. Okay. And that is not, then, you know, we're all, you know, until we're all free, none of us are free. So, you know, down to Native American women actually get paid less. They're 40%. And that's not going to change for 200 years unless we build the matriarchy. But the bigger problem is the wealth gap. We own 32% of what all men have in wealth. Okay, so if you take what you are worth outside of your husband or your father, or, you know, even if your brother is supporting you, and do that math, that's what you should be looking at, right? Like that, like for, and think about what you would do if you were by yourself with your kids or on your own. That is what's more scary to me, because that wealth is the power. So in other words, over 78% of the power, 68%, if I just did the math right, is with men. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have any power.
That's something I've tried to do. So Angela, it's weird because I never asked permission to do this. I walk into the Los Angeles Rams, they're like, sign in. I got 2 people with me and my wife. Go to the Miami Dolphins. Like when I go, she spent the day at Rock Nation with me, your old place.
Yeah.
We're in there with Jay Brown the whole day. Like, I don't ask permission, and I'm saying this out loud might out me. People will start preemptively saying, hey, come by yourself. But I did it not even intellectually knowing that. I did it from the standpoint of, dang, as a Black guy, I had kids late in life with her. Like, I could die, and she needs this IP that it would be a lot harder to call and say, hey, you loosely knew my husband, and I got these twin girls that want to know stuff. Like, can I come? And so I just tried to include her, and I'd love people watching this, if you're on the male side, to just figure out how do you get people in the room. Wealth is really, it doesn't matter about making you a good person or bad person. Wealth allows you the choices you talked about earlier that allow you to hire and fire or promote people. And without those choices, you're an advocate, which we need advocates, but you don't have authority. You're not deputized to do anything. Everybody I work with in the NFL, and I'm not trying to make waves, every person I work with is Black, and every one of their bosses is white, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And so you talked about laddering up. There's that piece that's like, okay, this guy or gal that I work with who's, a Black person in NFL, they can't hire their son or daughter.
Right.
The general manager can, for sure. Yeah. And there's some good ones out there. The Rams guy has been great. I mean, he just put on this whole event for us down in ESPN with ESPN's help in Atlanta, and he's doing his part. But the reality is there's people on his staff who could never hire their sister, who could never hire their mother. And so he has a different power position, even with money that he can give. And you can't make that up, in my opinion, in any other way other than influence. And the easiest way to have influence is that security of wealth, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
I think there was one more student question, and then I got a trick for you here, Jennifer, at that. My wife is going to trick you with the last question. It's my favorite thing that's going to happen today.
Yes. Oh, so the last student question was, if someone thinks they can legitimately help an insider or gatekeeper with something specific, like social media, tech, or anything else, should they ever offer to do it for free to gain credibility?
I think there's a period of time when you're starting out or trying to change jobs that will have people see you differently, right? That you could do that, but it's got to be a very limited period of time. And then you see, if I prove myself, would you hire me? Or, or like if I go to get a job, if there's not really a job there, then I can say that I interned for you, I worked for you, whatever that is, and you'll give me a reference. But you got to make sure you use it and it's got to be set out in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, you can't then just go back and like, hey, I did this. And like, that was never part of the deal. Like, you don't let people take advantage, because some will, not everybody, but some will. And so, make it part of that next move for you.
Before Angela asks her last question, it's actually Jennifer's question, by the way, but it's flipped a different way. It's the JJ question. But I've only seen a couple of the episodes. I'm going to have a link in here. I think people, especially, it's weird, I'm the male advocate for men to go to watch the Taking Care of Lady Business podcast, because I've had some instincts of how I wanted to help in listening to, like, I don't want to commit to anything. The Gallup interview you did affected me. How she can't get money, and that's. I look at her and I scream from 3,000 miles away, winner, 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 winner. Like, and I get, so I want people to, if you're a dude watching this, I'd actually tell you to go subscribe to the Taking Care of Lady Business podcast. There's a lot of information in there that is going to help me be a better dad to my daughters. But one of the things I saw in there is that this expectation of women who have money to have philanthropy. And Angela and I have talked about this a while ago. One of the ladies I've met that I put in that like super juggernaut category, she's an heiress. And so is her brother. She's 1 year older than her brother. And they're from here in Michigan. She's out in Colorado, but they're from here in Michigan. Everything that gets written about her says philanthropist and activist. And she has the exact same amount of money, it's multiple B's, as her brother, who is an angel investor,
Yeah.
and American businessman.
Yeah.
How do we tackle that? I feel like we just have to, not for individual names, but that's just so clearly bullshit and like propaganda. Women, I don't, and I've heard you say this, so I'm just saying on your behalf, talk about the avoiding the need to give your money away when you get it. You don't have to give your money away.
No, and actually, I'm very, like I said before, philanthropies are meant to be redundant, not like expanded, right? I'm not saying don't give your money to philanthropies, but when you're doing it and you're allocating, think about giving half of that actually to female-founded companies to grow, and they will help solving a lot of these issues that you are, you the giver are, passionate about. So think about what your philanthropy is, and then think about the female founded companies or, people of color founded companies that are in the same kind of lane, and start giving to them too. Because a lot of it, like once we have that money power, we are trying to resolve it and make it so we don't need them anymore, including most of the medical ones that could be resolved from more research or cheaper drugs, you know what I mean? Or any of the ones where, there's issues with like women and displacement or, domestic violence, etc. A lot of that has to do with lack of training. The number one reason why a woman goes back to her abuser is because they've ruined their credit or don't have choices because they have no money. You know what I mean? And it's like these kinds of things, like, look, if you're going to do philanthropies, look for the ones that are starting out, that are trying to solve real problems. And number two, like, take that equal amount of money and put it into investment. And investing.
It's weird because doing this little podcast here after the Oklahoma State gal said, hey, you got to connect us with these women that you've heard of or know or can get in touch with. I'll tell you off who it is, because at first I was offended by it, but after watching your episode on the philanthropy and being more business-minded, I get it. A lady who you're actually friends with, or you're connected with, I shouldn't use the word friends. Her husband did something for us with the NFL. He came and did it. It was great. All the players loved him. I got her information from them and reached out. She was like, yeah, we'll definitely do the podcast. My virtual speaking fee is $100,000. And I'm like, whoa. And I was taken back by it, even though I get it. I mean, she's one of the top 5, right?
Yeah.
But in the back end, and then I started thinking, oh, she has to have that guard up because people expect her to give her time.
Yeah.
And so even though this is a worthy cause, no question about it, Team Richardson doesn't get anything from this directly, except for hopefully our babies are better. But I was like, oh, it helped me resolve, like, holy smokes, $100,000 to do a Zoom. I'm in the wrong business. But saying that reminded me of this. Sorry, Angela. Jennifer Justice didn't have connections growing up. All right, mama knows some people now. How are you going to rectify that with your kids? Because some of what you learned was the grit, but have you given thought to like how you navigate that? Mama knows everybody now, and how much does Nico got to go get it on his own, or how much do they got to go do it themselves?
Well, I mean, I think, look, you get this and you get to this point, so your kids don't have to have that and take as long. Are they going to have to work hard? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to train that. I'm not going to hand that over to them. Am I going to introduce them to some people? Absolutely. But I know, because I have raised them this way, that they know that they are lucky and to have gratitude and to do the right thing with their money instead of using it, to force people down. It's to lift people up. And we need money and power in the hands of those kinds of people, right?
100%.
Of our kids. And so they're going to still learn the grit, etc., but they can't just take it, Yeah.
Angela, you want to end us off with the last question here?
Yeah, I would love to ask Jennifer Justice her famous last question. What's the worst advice you've been given? So what's the most appalling or shocking answer you've heard regarding bad advice women have received?
It's not actually, this is so easy for me. There's a lot of it. But it's not that like shocking or appalling. It's just that it's something that gets told to women all the time. Only a couple of my guests have actually used it, but it's that, you know what, just put your head down and work and you'll get noticed. No. If I put my head down and work, that allows you to make more money so you can go out. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. That only benefits you. That does not benefit me at all.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We again, we're going to meet a lot of ladies through this that we want to learn from. And I hope that our girls can take some of this and be like you in many ways. I watched your daughter doing a project that somebody sent me a link to on YouTube, and just, I love, our babies are only 4, but Angela will tell you, we've worked hard to make sure they know it's okay to be brown and it's okay to be a girl. And we know the world's not going to do that for them later. It'll eventually change, that they'll leave this house and somebody's going to say it's not cool to be brown and it's not cool to be a girl. And I love the idea that you've helped with us, not just for our kids, but all of these kids, that when they confronted with that, or even women who went in with the best intentions and thought, oh, they like me, they care about me, and it's 7 years later or 10 years later. And when they have that moment where they need like the real advice, when the world tells them that maybe everybody didn't think it was cool to be a girl, or that girls can be anything, that they have information like this and access with social media to follow you. We'll put the link to your Instagram in here. So I value your time. I appreciate it. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's been cool to learn about you, and I hope you enjoy. I don't know, are we on vacation or we're just recharging?
Well, no, we can work from anywhere, and I like Fire Island, so it's like, no, I'm working. I worked all morning. It's totally fine. But it's a great office location for the week. So yes, but thank you so much. I love everything you're doing. It's great to have advocates, that are men, and it's great to, be able to meet you all and get to know what you're doing too. So thank you for this opportunity to meet.
All right, thanks. Ladies, you can't stop a go-getter, right? A bunch of the information is out there. I hope that you go and find it. I hope this was helpful. We'll talk to you soon.